Welcome to the Living Medicine podcast, where we talk about ethical medical use of psychedelic psychotherapy, teaching skills, examining the issues, and interviewing interesting people. Now let's start today's show. Hi, this is Dr. Signe Goldman, your host for Living Medicine, where we interview clinical and medical professionals in the evolving ketamine and psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy space. Recent interviews we've done are with Ron Siegel from Harvard on mindfulness and psychedelics, and Dick Schwartz, the founder of Internal Family Systems, on non-ordinary or potential spiritual content in psychedelic sessions. So please check those out. Today we have part one of a recent interview Sandy did with Michael and Annie Mithoefer, the prominent and well-known MAPS researchers, talking about their experience, their life story, and their views on where psychedelic medicine is heading from their perspective. This episode is brought to you by Living Medicine Institute, a growing professional network for the psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy community. For more information, go to livingmedicineinstitute.com. Let's get started with part one of Sandy's interview.
I am Dr. Sandra Newis, mostly referred to by Sandy, of the Living Medicine Institute, and I am delighted to be here with you two, Michael and Annie Mithoefer. But I thought that it would be nice just to, give you all a chance to say a little bit about who you are and how you even got into this work. Like, how did you meet Rick Doblin? How did you get interested in MDMA work? Who were you before that? And what drew you to it in the first place? Like, how did, kind of the origin story, how did this even come to be?
So, I went to medical school in 1973 in Charleston, South Carolina, thinking I wanted to work as a doctor in a small town. I ended up instead deciding to go into emergency medicine, not psychiatry, but regular emergency medicine. So I practiced that for 10 years, and I found it exciting and gratifying for a while. But after a while, I felt a longing to have a different relationship with people. I was always doing things to people, which is very useful. If someone's not breathing, you can put a tube in and make them breathe. That's great. But after a while, I longed for a more collaborative kind of way of helping people approach their suffering. And of course, I had my own curiosity about my own consciousness. So I thought, well, I think 10 years in the ER is enough. What should I do with the medical degree? And Annie and I were both in college in the 60s, so it's interesting. You always
I wasn't in college in the 60s. You were.
You were in college in the early 70s. Yeah. I am older.
Close, but not older.
I am older. Anyway, you always get the task of course you took psychedelics in college in the 60s, which is what we did. Right. I did, and Annie was close behind. And, I came away from that not really understanding it, but having the idea that these were really important experiences, and in some way they changed my thinking about consciousness and reality in some very deep ways. And then I decided, well, now I need to do something more useful. So, when I was casting about for something more useful to do, I certainly, I was thinking a lot about those experiences back in the 60s. And then I came across an article about Stan Grof, a psychiatrist. And so I went to I read this article. It was a short thing, and I was just fascinated by it. So I went to the medical school library at Charleston and to see if they had any of his books, and they had Beyond the Brain. I checked it out. I was the first person to ever check it out.
Really?
There were no stamps. There were no stamps in the back of the books. But it was there in Charleston, South Carolina, in the medical school library. So when I read that, I was like, wow.
Right.
This explains so much of my experiences, including some very difficult ones back in the 60s. And so I thought, okay, he's a psychiatrist. I think that's what I want to do. And so I wondered, is this guy still alive? And so I made some calls, and I found out he's alive and he has a training program.
Awesome.
So I applied to psychiatry residency and the Grof transpersonal training at the same time.
Oh, wow, I did not know
And
that.
I started them the same month. Because
interesting.
my first month of psychiatry rotation, I took a vacation time and went to my first breathwork workshop with Stan Groff and Christina Groff and Jack Kornfield. So, you know, it was an amazing experience because what Stan was doing, the way he was approaching healing with the breath work, which was all based on what he learned with LSD.
Yeah.
But he discovered you can also do this without the drugs, which is in itself a really important point.
Right.
So, but he was teaching how he learned to work with people with LSD and what they taught him about what they needed. And so that was what the breath work was based on.
Yeah.
So I had this interesting thing of going back and forth over, I did the breathwork training over the next several years, and I'd go for 1 or 2 weeks at a time, and then come back to psychiatry residency.
That's super
And I could see
interesting.
the contrast. You know,
Yeah.
everybody at breathwork thought psychiatry was evil. Everybody in the Psychiatry Institute of Psychiatry thought lying on the floor with your patients and while they were hyperventilating was like malpractice.
Well, and that's the day when it was really, there was much more of a split.
There was
like
much
the
more of a
medical
split.
doctors do the body,
Yeah.
you know, like you all might do the emotional,
Yeah.
but those things are not related. We stay in our lane, right?
Yeah. And I was seeing, actually, these people all have something, both sides have something valuable.
Yeah.
But I also was very struck by, I don't see people at the Institute of Psychiatry doing something that I want to do. I see Stan Groff doing the kind of thing I want to do. So,
Well, you also happen to be working with people with dissociative identity disorder
Yeah.
and PTSD.
I was clinical chief of the trauma service and
So that
the
also-
dissociative
Oh,
disorder
interesting.
service. So,
Where is that?
When he was at the medical university in his training.
So
Yeah.
as it happened, so we knew we wanted to work with non-ordinary states of consciousness for their healing potential, as Stan Groff says. But we thought we had to do that without drugs.
But back up, because once you became a psychiatrist, that's when we started working together.
Right. Yeah.
Before that, we had not worked together.
Yes.
so-
Annie was a coronary care nurse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
we started working together and doing breathwork groups
Oh.
for, we did those for 10 years.
Yeah. So you co-led them.
yeah.
We co-led them.
Interesting.
And we saw some patients and then just some people from the community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, our practice pretty soon became mostly trauma, and many people would come to the office for looking for help, and you know I'd start seeing them and then suggest the possibility of breath work, and they'd do that, or people would come to breath work and then they'd want more integration, so they'd come to do some integration in the office. So our practice was always very informed by working with this model of working with the healing potential of helping people shift consciousness. So
So just to give some context, what years-ish is that?
it was 91 when I started my psychiatry residency.
Okay. And the
we
breath.
started working
94,
together
we
probably,
started doing breathwork groups
yeah,
in Vermont and then later in
96, yeah.
Yeah.
That is so interesting because that is, now I know, at the time I sort of started to move in some of those directions too, but, and it was hard. And now I understand that it was because it was very cutting edge to do this integration. So you all were really at the forefront of that particular thing, like way before the MDMA work.
Yeah.
This integrating
And especially-
non-ordinary states of
right.
consciousness with traditional psychotherapy and psychiatric
Right.
approaches.
Yeah, and that's really what, I mean, we learned so much of that from Stan.
Yeah.
We also had a lot of our own experience with trauma, but it was still based on this basic idea we learned from Stan that you can trust the person's inner healing intelligence and support it and not be, the support is very, very important, but not to be directive about it, not to think you know what the person needs. So
Right.
that's the core of all this to me. So we learned that from Stan and from our own experiences. 'Cause
Okay, so fast forward.
yeah, I just
So-
want to say part of the
Yeah.
breathwork training that I wasn't really expecting, but was immediately apparent. The most important part was doing your own work.
Yeah.
That's where we really learned what it's like to be in those places with that setting, with someone there, and to support you, and how much support you want, and how much autonomy you want, that kind of thing. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're doing, it was great. People were having amazing healing with the breath work. And we had no interest in being researchers, we were clinicians.
Right.
But over time we noticed there's a significant subset of people for whom the breath work isn't doing it.
Or,
And these are all people.
they get better, but it takes 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
That, you mean the breath work?
Yeah, doing the
breath
breath
work.
work continuously as a
Right.
practice.
So I view all these as just tools for shifting consciousness. MDA is one, psilocybin's one, and breathwork is one. So yeah. So we decided, okay, well, we're very well aware. We had experienced MDMA with a therapist ourselves since the 60s. And we knew about the papers, the case reports. George Greer and Rick Talbert and others had written about using MDMA in therapy, but they hadn't done research, before it was illegal. So we were like, this is not okay. People are coming with suffering saying, what can I do?
Right.
When what we have to offer doesn't work, they're saying, what can I do? And we're thinking, you could do this, but we can't offer that.
Right.
Maybe this would help. There's reason to believe. It's a matter of, we didn't know, but we knew that we needed research because there were very promising case reports for reputable people.
Right.
That's a signal that you need to really pursue it vigorously with controlled research, but no one had done that.
Well, and all the research that came before it was all shut down.
Right.
Granted, it wasn't an MDMA at that point because the molecule hadn't made it into be able to kind of even be utilized that way. I don't even know exactly when it was synthesized, but that other types of research was really promising, and it was just squashed.
Right.
Yeah. Stan Groff had a paper in Journal of the American Medical Association about LSD for alcoholism.
Yes.
Yeah.
But all of the practitioners that were using MDMA before it got shut down, I mean, there were lots of them.
Between probably a couple thousand between 85 or so and
Well, it was shut down in 85.
between the late 70s and 84 was emergency scheduling.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Well, and the number of just anecdotal reports, really, frankly, myself being one of them, where you're just like, oh my God, my life is totally different from this moment forward. Like, I see things dramatically different. And whether that be in, patients or people in the quote unquote normal population or, people who have trauma histories who are still functioning in the normal population. And I mean, there's just so many of those reports.
yes. Yeah, that's, if we talk about the placebo effect and stuff later, we can get into that more, but that's one of the striking things. It's like people don't just take a pill and say, I feel better now. They have a coherent, complex, very intricate and interesting process, a psychological process they can describe about what that entailed. So it's pretty hard to just write that off. For me, anyway.
So then you looked for Rick.
So then we thought, okay, we've got to do some research on this. How can we do it? We were members of MAPS, but we never met Rick, because we found out about MAPS from Rick's old girlfriend, Kylie Taylor, who was one of the breathwork teachers. And so we were members.
Funny how these things just these seemingly random occurrences that lead us into dramatically different directions. It's great.
So we thought, we were wondering how we could do the research. And then actually I heard something on NPR about Deborah Mash's Ibogaine work in St. Kitts. And I ended up going down there to see what she was doing.
Interesting.
So I got the idea, okay, we'll have to go to an offshore nation. I wonder which is the best one to go to. Maybe I should ask Rick Dalwin. He would probably know.
Oh, yeah, right.
So I called Rick, and he lived in Charlotte.
No. We saw Rick at the conference.
I called him, and he wasn't home.
Oh, okay, that's right. Okay, I forgot that.
And then I dropped
You got his number
Michael
from his
probably
then
called,
girlfriend
right?
or his ex-girlfriend?
I think
like very literally how
I
this
don't know.
happened.
I think it was probably in the MAPS bulletin.
You probably called like the day you got back from St. Kitts.
Anyway, Rick wasn't home. I never got around to calling him back. And then a couple months later, we get this pamphlet about Ralph Metzner's first annual ayahuasca conference in San Francisco. And I said to Annie, let's go to that. We're interested in ayahuasca anyway, and maybe we'll get some leads on how to do psychedelic therapy.
Right.
So we went to the meeting. We walked in the room. It was all in one room. It was a small conference. There were some very cool people there. And I saw Rick Dalwin across the room, and I recognized him.
Is that him?
Well, I recognized him from the MAPS bulletin.
Right.
So I went over, introduced myself, and I said, can you advise me on which offshore nation I should go to do psychedelic research. And he said, "You're a psychiatrist?" I said, "Yeah, you want to do psychedelic research?" He said, "You can do it
You're the
here."
person I've been waiting for.
Exactly.
I was the person he'd been waiting for. Right. He was the person we'd been waiting for. He said, "You can do it here and we'll help you."
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And you're like, seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It just seemed totally natural. Okay, cool.
Right. And you were all in Charleston, in the Charleston Medical Center?
Well, no, we had a
Or
private
you still in
office.
Vermont?
Yeah.
We were
Okay.
in Charlotte. We had a private practice. I was on the clinical faculty at the medical school,
Gotcha.
but we didn't work there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Rick said, "What do you want to study?" And I said, "MDMA, LSD, psilocybin, and ayahuasca mainly."
We'll leave DMT for the others.
He said, "Yeah, me too, but we got to start somewhere."
Right.
So we had about a 20-minute conversation. We agreed the best way to start was MDMA for PTSD. That's what made the most sense. And that was,
And that's what we were doing in
we
the
were doing
office.
PTSD anyway.
That's what you were doing in your office. That's
Yeah.
what you're doing with the breath work.
Rick was most interested in MDMA, so it was a really good fit. So Rick said, "Why don't you go home and write a draft protocol, and we'll start working on it." That was in January of 2000, I think.
Awesome.
A year later, in
Yeah.
October of 2001, we submitted our FDA application. So it took a little over about a year and a half.
so
We had a lot of input from many experts about the protocol because we didn't know about research at that time.
Yeah.
So I imagine you all must have also just hit it off on a personal level too. I mean, to
With Rick,
commit
yes.
to 20 plus.
They're a match made in
however
heaven.
many years of working together.
They both had the same kind of energy, and
Although
yes.
Rick's got more of it, but he's young.
and they're both. They need somebody to ground them,
Yeah.
which I do.
That's
and
where Annie comes
Rick's,
in.
Rick's wife Lynn grounds him. So
Well, Rick has always said we have a similar risk tolerance, so
There you go.
that we work together pretty well. And
love that.
we're really, really good friends now. And it's,
So I would love to hear what you have to offer about that, your role, like, how you show up
well,
in this.
yeah.
And just,
I love working with the patients.
Yeah.
And really. I think Michael and I both love this, but we love processing
Yeah.
things with people. And getting into, what is the cause of this, or, really processing, deep processing. So I loved working that way with people. So, if I knew now how long it had taken and how much work it was, I don't know that I would have done it.
I thought you were like signing on for a lifetime mission.
Because it really has been.
Yeah.
But it's all been worth it
Right.
for the patients.
Yeah.
Because the people we saw, we could help people get better, but when we got to work with people with MDMA,
Yeah.
it was a lot different.
Yeah.
Seeing people really heal quickly. Yeah.
So you saw some things in breath work. You saw that there was utility in combining that with the therapeutic approach for PTSD. And then enter MDMA, and you saw all that come together in a different way.
Right. And we had to learn how to be researchers.
Right.
Because MAPS
interesting.
really wasn't. We were the team.
Yeah.
There were people from MAPS.
there were 5 of us at that time: me, Annie, Rick, Ilsa, and Valerie, maybe.
Yeah. And
Interesting.
so we
You, and now it's just like
We had to learn how to do the charting and everything, so it was all new. There was an element of in the beginning, we got a lot of scrutiny in Charleston, and that, I have a little bit of PTSD about that, just bringing something into Charleston and the critics and what people were saying. There were newspaper articles and things. So
approximately what time frame?
that was when we were first getting approval.
So that would have been
2001.
Yeah, 2001. And, but then we got through that.
Yeah.
We got through that.
But what did they say? And how was that for you? I mean, were you picking up newspapers and being like, oh my gosh?
Yeah, they had a newspaper
or?
article that we didn't talk to the person that was writing the article ahead of time. He said, Dr. Mithoefer is giving MDMA to his patients.
Front page. MDMA is an illegal drug, yet Dr. Mithoefer gives it to his patients every day.
Every day. You're like, oh no.
And we had patients who are like, 70 years old that would come to the office with their Bible, and regular patients,
Right.
and they're like, my friends just said that you were doing this, Yeah, so there was a lot of that kind of attitude.
I mean, what would you do? Would you just be like, actually, that's just false, or did you try to
call a
rebut
lawyer.
it, or like
Usually
what?
they said, but it must be okay because you're a good guy.
We got called a lawyer and got that retracted.
Yeah.
Of course,
And there
it's
were
at the
some
back
ways
of
in
the
which
paper.
I figured we must be on the right track because we're causing a lot of consternation. But yeah, that was a mistake. We've learned a lot about the media, hopefully, since then. But that was a Charleston reporter. I kept refusing to talk to him because we just wanted, we don't want a lot of publicity. We want to get the data. Leave us alone. But that wasn't working.
Well,
but
can
the
I
first
just have
article, sorry. go
Just
ahead.
a moment of like what you just said. Like our patients, like knew, they knew we were a good guy. They liked us. That really speaks a lot about you as clinicians, right? That here's your patients like getting all of this, like, first of all, that they're like, sure, breath work and what, we're combining that. And then they get all this and they're still like, oh, okay, well, we trust you. I mean, you must have done an extraordinary job of developing trust, which is such a big part of this work.
Yeah.
Like, so I just want to recognize that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Sandy.
One of my favorite experiences is at the local hardware store, which we've been going to for about 35 or 40 years by then. Really great hardware store. After the paper thing came out, then we got the lawyer and they put a retraction in. So I walk into the hardware store and the owner says, "Geez, Doc, I saw they published a retraction, but that was lame. The article was on the front page. They put the retraction on the back on Friday."
Oh,
So
of course.
even the hardware store guy was
Oh,
supporting
I
us.
love it. So, see? I think people are like, go you.
Yeah.
So you had already like earned people's trust and, developed support. And, I just appreciate that and recognize that just being a critical part of the process.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Being reasonable helps.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're in Charleston, all this stuff. Like you are on a team. You're writing this trial, or you're submitting for the first trial, and it was just a team of 5. It was like the 2 of you and Rick and 2 other people.
Yeah, and at the site, it was just us.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had a psychologist in town that we worked
They
with.
did the testing.
They
but
did
as
all
far
the
as
testing.
Site, we did. We called people to the appointments. We did the screening. We did all the paperwork. We cooked the food.
Yeah.
We washed the sheets.
We picked them up at the airport.
There was nobody else to do
that's
anything.
a big thing.
Yeah, and I think, doing breath work for years, that's what taught us.
Yeah.
Like, when you're taking care of people in those states, when you're doing therapy with people, you're taking care of them. Right. So it was like something we learned from breath work.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's just one of the things that's important for people to know. Like, there really is a fundamental difference between a 6 or 8 hour session and a 1 hour session.
Yeah.
The level of like care and kind of the importance to be present with the person, with the client in that, it's just different.
Yeah.
It is different.
Longer sessions are different, and I know that's one of the criticisms that leverage, like, what are you all doing? And we'll get to that, but just like that level of care being primary. Which has really, been part of psychotherapy from the beginning. I mean, that's unconditional positive regard. Like, humanistic psychology. People say, like, oh, that's not a thing. Well, it is a thing. It's been a part of therapeutic process forever.
Yeah.
And any sort of human relations, the caring piece, the showing up piece, the being able to be present piece. You
And
can't
the-
remove that.
And the innate capacity to heal.
Yeah.
Hippocrates said, "The physician treats, nature heals." I mean, it's not new.
Right.
No one's ever claimed physicians are healing people.
Right.
We're just creating favorable conditions.
Right, creating the optimal conditions for healing and then moving that forward using established methods and interventions and techniques that have been looked at in a variety of different domains. That seems, when you put it that way, it seems to make perfect sense.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it seems very dramatically new because they're psychedelic medicines evolved. But as you say, it's
and the
Carl
time.
Rogers was talking about this.
exactly.
Many people have talked about this.
Right. You know, man's search for meaning, Viktor Frankl.
Right.
Like, you know, I mean, might have seen the opposite, but really, you know, like people accessing their own inner wisdom and their own inner healing is not a new concept.
Yeah.
No.
So, you
It's
know.
an old, very old concept.
Yeah. So, okay. So at this point, we're up to the early 2000s. You're submitting, you're running the trials, you're learning research methodology. You know, I was trained as a psychotherapy outcome research methodology to apply to outdoor-based therapeutic programming, which doesn't sound like it is the same, but it is actually like a very similar.
It's a real parallel.
Yeah, like, you know, longer sessions and different types of things. And the reason I'm bringing that up is just the recognition of the difficult, like how incredibly difficult it is to write up and develop and fund and run in a way that is actually scientifically valid clinical trials. Like that's a monumental undertaking. And I don't think people realize, like, you don't just like, you know, do some therapy and, you know, write some notes and really good.
No,
I mean,
especially
it's like,
when you're doing it for the FDA.
right, exactly. Yeah. So which is an interesting question. So when did the FDA enter into this discussion with you all? Because I don't know, again, that's another thing I don't think people realize is that the FDA, my understanding, and, you know, based on our conversations too, that the FDA has really been a partner at every step of this along the way.
Right.
So it's not like they're
We had to get the
suddenly, like,
protocol
looking at it
approved
new.
by the FDA.
Yeah.
And we had to get approval from the IRB,
Yeah.
which also took a long time.
And the
We don't have
DEA.
time to go into that. And the DEA, which also took a long time, which we don't have time to go into. But,
I mean,
there
that
were a
must
lot
have
of
been a lot of
obstacles.
finagling.
A lot of obstacles.
But the FDA, we submitted our first application October 1st, 2001.
Yeah.
About 28 days later, they emailed and said, we want a phone call. Rick and I had a phone call with them, and we discussed different things like, well, maybe you should only treat people who have taken MDMA. No, we don't think that's a good idea. Okay. You need to do the blood pressure every 15 minutes. We don't think we do. Yes, you do. Okay. You know, we did some horse trading and worked out any concerns, and it was approved. They said, okay, write it down, fax it to us, you're ready to go. It took another 2.5 years for the DEA and the IRB, as Annie said. But we've been talking, we've been exchanging documents and having both online and in-person meetings with FDA since November of 2001. We've had a lot of them.
Right.
And they've been, you know, partners may not be quite the right word, but we've been moving forward with them every step of the way. They review things, we make agreements, they tell us what we can do next. They know that. That's one reason I'm still somewhat hopeful they may approve despite the AdCom, the advisory committee, because the advisory committee did not understand our research at all.
Yeah.
FDA understands it intimately, and they've got all the raw data. They analyze it themselves. They don't care what our analysis is. They make their own conclusions.
Oh, they analyze it themselves. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
They don't care what you've published or anything.
Right.
Just give us the raw data. And then they've been to the sites and spent weeks inspecting the original raw data records to make sure everything matches. So they know
let's
so much
back
more
up
about
to the studies, just because there were some criticisms about the safety, this and that, the vital signs. Like Michael said, we had to do vital signs every 15 minutes, sometimes every 5 minutes, depending on what blood pressure was happening, what pulse. In the first study, we had an ER doctor and an ER nurse in the front room of the office for every person, for every session. I mean, not integration sessions. They never had to do anything. We never had to call them for anything.
So let me put a little context to what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
So just recently, there was just a consensus statement of experts. You know, you all are obviously like the experts, but I would imagine you couldn't be on such a thing because of bias and things like that. But where they named, basically, they said there's urgency. This is why they need to look at it, and then we can talk about some of the methodology. There's urgency. We've got 13 million people suffering in the U.S. with PTSD. We've got 17 veterans a day that are committing suicide. This is timely. This is urgent. This is efficacy. Like, we've got multiple rounds of studies that are showing consistent results at fairly unprecedented levels. And then there's the safety, which is what you're talking about. And what I'm hearing you saying is that there was safety from the very beginning. Like the safety data has been gathered, the FDA is aware of it.
Yeah, and then we got to a point in phase 3 where they only had to take the blood pressure at the beginning of the supplemental dose and at the end of the day, unless something was going on for someone. So,
but
and
it took
the
us
reason
years
we
and
got
six studies to walk it back from every 15 minutes and 2 physicians and 2 nurses to not needing that stuff. But we didn't just decide that.
Totally.
We very methodically went through one study after each time. We discuss it with the FDA and they'd say, okay, we agree. You can do the blood pressure less often. You've got a track record. It's not necessary. So we very intentionally and carefully figured out what level of medical support was needed. And we started with a very, very conservative level. So it wasn't just a cavalier not needing to measure.
So like every hour? Well, how often did you have to check the blood pressure?
Every 15 minutes for 4 hours. Then every 30 minutes for the rest of the time. Right. Except if it got above certain levels, which were not all that high. Then
160 over 110.
So it was
every 5
very,
minutes.
very conservative.
Right. Well, and I can validate, having just seen videos, having just gone through the training, like, there would be this like dance, right? Where somebody just be like gently putting on the blood pressure cuff, and there's a clock over there. Sometimes it would ding, and then they'd go get it. And, that in and of itself, like, how do you work that into the therapeutic process without that being invasive?
Well,
People didn't mind it.
Yeah.
We were concerned about that. But actually, if people had any reaction, it was more like, I'm sorry, you have to go to so much trouble to do this. This seems like a hassle.
But they they would also be like, I'm glad you're keeping me safe.
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There's somebody's watching what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that feels good. Like, and, I do ketamine-assisted psychotherapy in the patient's lab, we're like being medically cared for. That I think helps people drop in.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you saying is, in the beginning, it was like literally every 15 minutes for the first 4 hours. This would obviously be tracked. You would have had data tracking methods. Those would have gone to the FDA. The FDA is looking at it independently.
Right.
And so over time,
we had tapes from the blood pressure machine so we could prove it.
Right.
And the FDA received all that information.
Right.
Yeah. So I imagine, and I want to revisit these 3 points, but I imagine, like for me, kind of watching that, having like very literally just gone through this training, it was like, oof. And like I said in the beginning, I thought about you all immediately, and I thought about Marcel and Bruce, who I just spent time with, and just like, I mean, obviously there's going to be part that wants to kind of like talk about the methodology, and we'll get there, but like, what was that like for you on a personal level, having like devoted so much, like mission? It's a mission. It's a 20-year mission. Right?
Yeah.
That it's not just work, I'm hearing. It's life, it's relationships, it's community, it's learning, it's commitment. And then to just be like, oh, phew.
I started out being really proud of MAPS, of Lycos, of Bera. And then I started listening to the public and then I realized that Bera didn't get time to answer the questions, and I was starting to, wow, that's too bad. And then started listening to the public comments, and it made me sad. Yeah. It made me sad that there were some people that were harmed. And the thing I think that wasn't named was clinical research can be harmful for people.
Oh, yeah.
So putting people through, like, our phase 2 studies, people could cross over. In the beginning, we didn't have approval for people to cross over for the first 5 patients. Because
crossover means what?
Crossover means that they can get MDMA after they go through the placebo.
Okay. Which, by the way, for anybody who's not familiar, like, that is state-of-the-art psychotherapy outcome research methodology. You don't have a waitlist control. You have a placebo group that gets exactly the equivalent treatment, and then you've got the experimental group, and then the opportunity later, if the placebo group wants to get the experimental treatment. That is like the highest level that I was taught.
And the placebo group is the therapy only group.
Yes.
Because they were getting therapy during that time. So in the beginning, we could not let the first 5 patients cross over and get MDMA because the FDA said we don't have enough evidence that should happen.
Okay.
So after the first 5, and think about those first 5 people. They're going through this study, they come in and it's their last chance, they think.
Yeah.
It's the end of the line for me.
Can you say more? What, like just
Yeah, I mean, there was one man that said the only thing that was keeping him alive were his 2 cats, and when they died, he was going to commit suicide. And
They were old cats.
And they were old cats, and he was in that first group, and he had tremendous PTSD, but he also had really, really bad depression.
Yeah.
And so we had to wait till we got all 5, and then we got approval for those to cross over. Well, then from then on in phase 2, people could cross over. They could go through the placebo part, and then they could immediately cross over if they wanted to, or they could wait a month and cross over.
Oh, okay.
And do the study all over again with
interesting.
MDMA.
Okay.
In phase 3, the FDA wouldn't let us do that.
Oh.
They said we want to have everybody go through. So the first phase 3 study, there were 90 participants. Because of COVID, there were only 90.
Yeah.
But all 90 people had to go through before those people could cross over. And so, like, if you're number 1, it's going to be 3
It
years.
was a while. I mean, it was a long time, right?
Yeah.
Several
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, and people were suicidal. I mean, when they realized, I didn't get it.
Yeah.
They'd heard, and that's the other thing, they'd heard so much about the people that had been helped by it. So, getting harmed and then some people that took things out of context, said things about our therapy approach. Yeah, it saddened me. I think that's anger, but mostly sad for the patients, for the participants that went through our study because they wanted to get help, but also they knew this might help other people with PTSD.
So that's something you mentioned just in conversation, that what you saw was people just really wanting participants, like feeling really good about the fact that they were participating in something that had the potential to be helpful for others.
Yeah.
And so many of the veterans told us, well, I feel kind of guilty that when I talk to other veterans, because I've had this opportunity and they're still suffering, but at least they're saying, well, they're glad to know there's something out there. There might be a possibility for them in the future.
Yeah.
So there were not only the people that were in the study, there were many, many people tracking this because they really were hoping for themselves. So the number of people that were sad about it or disappointed was pretty large. So I was sad and I was angry. And also, in a peculiar way, it felt very familiar because this is how it was all the time for the first 10 years.
Sure. Like
People misunderstood what we were doing. They accused us of this, that, and the other thing. It feels more like that's what it was always like. And then, once we began to get good data, suddenly everything was, sweetness and light. And the media was talking about it as a serious possibility for treatment.
That's true.
Yeah.
And now we're kind of drawn back. And I think, Sandy, I think you put your finger on part of it when you discuss this was a very good design for psychotherapy research. But there's massive confusion because this is drug development research, according to the FDA. The FDA knows a great deal about drug development research and almost nothing about psychotherapy research.
Right. Well, and I think that's the crux of the matter. When I went through the training, I was at a trauma training. I was not at an MDMA training. I was at a medication-assisted psychotherapy training.
Right.
And I think that's, that's a fundamental difference, like that people don't really understand. I work with ketamine, and ketamine-assisted psychotherapy are completely different. Like the medicine is a tool, but the therapy is really the overlay. And so it seems like what people don't really get is that the FDA just generally doesn't have protocols in place, to do psychotherapy outcome research with drugs. And so, it seemed to me like the review panel was coming from the drug side.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. Like that's what they do, but there are different methodological considerations.
Yeah. Well, and the FDA does understand now, I think, after these 20 plus years, that therapy is important here. I think they understand that. I even made a video for them from the sessions to watch. They've seen the therapy.
Yeah.
But they don't, it's not their bailiwick.
Yeah.
They're not going to regulate that, and they don't, they don't have in-depth capacity in that way. But they do understand it. But I think the AdCom did not understand it.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is this difference. It's never happened before. A real psychotherapy drug combination going through FDA. It just hasn't happened.
There hasn't been a path for that either. There isn't a path for that.
It's confusing to people. I mean, the AdCom, I'm sure they're good people doing their job as best they can.
I mean, it's their job to rule out all, that's the scientific method, right? Rule out all alternative hypothesis for the data. And that's what they were doing. Like, it's just that it seemed like there were other considerations that they weren't taking into account.
Yeah, some serious ones. And I think, frankly, one reason this, initially this was threatening to people because it was these dangerous drugs, they thought. Yeah. People got over that. They saw it's going to be serious treatment. But now I think it's actually threatening to the way people have been practicing medicine and psychology.
Oh, for sure.
I think that's part of it. There's a lot of confusion because, when you start talking about, we don't know how to heal people. We want to support them in their own innate capacity to heal. That's just 180 degrees from the way most people are trained. That we're the experts. We know how to. We have this form of therapy. This is the protocol. This is how you do it, or we have this medicine, and we're giving people the medicine, and then we'll see what the medicine does. It's just an entirely different model. If we really pay attention to what people are reporting from these sessions, they're describing a whole different approach to human healing. That's so much deeper and richer than the mental health system is doing for the most part. There are notable exceptions.
And the way psychiatry has been for the last 20 years. It's been concentrating on getting rid of symptoms with medicines and not looking at the underlying cause.
Well, and I think one of the things I think is so interesting, the VA has bought into prolonged exposure because that's what they have the best data on. And, the neurobiological approaches to working with trauma people, the somatic people would say, well, they're just putting them into dissociation. That's a separate conversation. But, what I've wondered about is that you're saying they're it's going against what they've been doing. But really, it's not. To me, it's like a both and. It's just like an evolution of the field. Like there are some elements, what I saw in videos and what I understand, when the events emerge, there are some elements that have some parallels to exposure therapy.
Sure.
It's just done in a different way. Right. It's not like, okay, we're going to talk about the thing, and now we're doing SUDS, and where are you right now, and kind of moving and pushing in that direction. It's that inner wisdom allowing that to naturally emerge when it does, and then working with it. Correct?
Yeah, good point.
Is that so? To me, it's like, well, what about the both and perspective on the scientific method? To me, this is an evolution of the science.
Oh, I agree.
It's actually building on what has come before in the therapeutic model that you all developed.
Yeah, and I think that, and actually I wrote a paper for the Math Bulletin in 2013 about, this seems strange, but look at all the things that are elements of other therapies that come up spontaneously in the MDMA sessions. Imaginal exposure does happen.
Yeah.
Cognitive recognizing and correcting cognitive distortions does happen. Transference does happen.
Yeah.
Psychodynamic things do happen. Somatic things do happen. People become aware of parts. All these elements of these other therapies tend to manifest spontaneously. So the difference is not that. I mean, they're all tapping into the same thing, like you say. The difference is the role of the therapist, I think.
Yeah.
That people get uncomfortable because it's much less prescriptive about what they need to do.
And yet, again, from my psychotherapy outcome research training, like manualized protocols are protocols that have a manual that guides it. It's not scripted.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
You don't have to do it exactly. I mean, you do it, but you don't have to do it exactly how it says.
Because that's not realistic. Like, that's not real work.
Right.
Like, what I was taught is if really, you know, the therapeutic relationship is the primary determinant of outcome, and that's been found over and over and over again. Like, that is the primary determinant of outcome, then you have to put the relationship first and then draw from the techniques in a skilled and relational fashion, which is what it seems like you all have done repeatedly.
And that confuses the hell out of people if they're just thinking of it as a drug development process. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Living Medicine. Be sure to check out part 2 of this interview in a subsequent episode. Thanks for listening to Living Medicine. We'll see you again next time. Be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.